Hey folks, welcome to the latest edition of the Digital CxO podcast. I'm your host, Mike Vizard. Today we're with Mike Rothman, who is General Manager for TechStrong Research. We're going to be talking about security and digital transformation and how these things may be coming together. Hey Mike, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Mike. I guess there won't be any confusion as to who should be here, right? It's both Mikes, so we're good.
There you go. I think you have a much more distinct, harder New York accent that people will pick up on for sure. All right. Here's the question of the day. We've been hearing people talk about how the attitude of cybersecurity folks is changing in this digital transformation era because they are aware that they need to enable things and not just be Dr. No in the office of no and resulting in people kind of figuring out a way to do an end run around them. And that all sounds lovely, but is it true? Do you think that the security folks have a little more empathy for the whole process now? Or is it just kind of, we want them to be this way, but maybe they're just too hard conditioned to participate and from their perspective, everything's a threat?
Well, I think the reality is everything is a threat. So, we need to kind of keep it in context from the standpoint that just because folks are, let's say, hyper aware of some of the issues that, it may be perceived to not be as supportive as, they may be as part of the digital transformation efforts. The reality is a lot of the fears are well-founded. Right. So what we need to do is really think about it, and especially from a security standpoint, is how can we go through those diligence efforts to track down what are real risks that we have to worry about, what are situations where we really would impact, kind of the success of the digital transformation and or potentially put some of our data at risk. And work with the teams so that it's, kind of a productive effort as opposed to, again, positioning it as, no, we can't do that. It's always a matter of yes, but really providing the context around what the potential issues are that, could potentially, again, threaten corporate data or any of those, new initiatives that the digital transformation is starting to contemplate.
Now, most business executives are trained to manage risk, right? If you go to business school, that's basically what they tell you for the next 4 years is, every decision has some level of risk and you need to evaluate it. So who makes the decision about what the level of risk really is? Is it the business side or is it the security side? And are the security people conscious enough of the risk versus reward equation to make that decision? Or, as one guy once joked, he said, if my security people had been around at the time of the invention of the phone, they would have told me not to use it because there might be some leak in information.
And I suspect there was a number of leaked conversations, back in the day of the shared party lines and the like. So again, those fears may not have been, so unfounded from that perspective. But to your point, Mike, the security folks are never going to be in a position to, give the thumbs up or give the thumbs down to a business initiative, right? The business folks have to own that risk. The responsibility of the security team and the security professionals is to surface that risk, communicate that risk, help folks understand really the tangible aspects of that risk, start to present some alternatives to either defer or transfer that risk. But ultimately, whether the company accepts that risk or not is really something that the business has to decide, and ultimately that the business has to own. But, in the real world, it does tend to be a little bit more of a gray area in terms of who is ultimately responsible if and when something goes south. But I've never been of the opinion that security folks should be making decisions along those lines. But they do have to, educate and inform the business as to, what they're doing and what the potential downsides are.
Right. That all said, do you think that we're going to see some major spike in attacks and a lot of compromises of these digital transformation projects? Because a lot of them were launched immediately after COVID, and it was kind of a rush in the sense that people were freaking out about the business is going to get destroyed. We need to go digital. We need to accelerate all these programs. And I wonder, a year later and maybe a year or two from now, there's going to be a lot more breaches of these highly sensitive, mission critical applications that we're not anticipating today because we did rush so many of them?
I don't know if it's restricted to just business transformation efforts, right? I mean, I think that a lot of applications were, kind of rolled out maybe without the proper forethought or diligence, in order to make sure that, that they were protected from that standpoint. I also think that there was a significant cloud migration that happened at the same time, in terms of replatforming a number of different applications. And again, they may not necessarily have been related to business transformation, may have just been, kind of a generational upgrade to, some of those applications that didn't have the proper diligence and protection there. So do I think there'll be more attacks? I do. If there's one thing we can count on, it's that there'll be more attacks tomorrow than there are today. Are business transformation efforts more, or digital transformation efforts more at risk? Maybe. I think that any application initiative that doesn't undergo the proper threat modeling, and kind of security treatment, as it is prepared to be moved into whatever platform it's going to do, is going to be at risk. Right. So I just kind of group them all up into, yes, we have increased risk. Yes, I think the pandemic did rush a number of things, and we didn't do as much diligence as we probably needed to. But I'm not sure it's any different than it's been for the past 20 years, right? We rush stuff. We do things. Security isn't in the game. Stuff happens. We try to adapt and protect it by bolting on technology. I think, if anything, this longer term evolution to cloud native and DevOps, and the ability to start building security into, both the architectural, the development, and the operational motions, will be a net positive from an application security posture. But anything that's rushed is certainly going to, have an increased risk profile for sure.
I think you bring up an excellent point. A lot of this traces back to our insecurity around application security, as it were. And I guess my question is what to do about it, because when I talk to a lot of security teams, and maybe you see something different, but they've always been focused on network security, security operations, and the things that they own in a budget. And it feels like, to me, they always thought application security belonged to the developers. And so they didn't put as much budget for that. And the developers always thought that the security people somehow or other was managing this. And the end result is nobody managed it.
Yeah, that's right. And I think we've had inconsistent incentives on both sides that have, really contributed to this problem, right? Developers are not incented to ship secure code, right? They're incented to ship code on time. Maybe there's an unspoken expectation that it'll be secure, but again, being able to specify that, and quantify that, and ensure that, those objectives are adhered to and achieved, it just hasn't happened. Right. And you get to a point where the security folks don't really have visibility, or hadn't had visibility into that environment. Again, I think that DevOps, does assist or help in providing some more visibility and integrating testing into earlier stages of the development process. So again, I think that's a net positive, but the incentives have certainly not been aligned. And I think that's been, the biggest problem that we've had is, even if it's the pointing fingers thing, right? No, you're responsible, I'm responsible, you're responsible. Nobody at the top has basically said we're all responsible and we've got to ship secure code. So it has been something that's been, neglected. Again, I do think that we're moving in the right direction, and not just with DevOps. We start to see a lot of organizations rolling out security champions programs. So they're in effect working with developers, not security folks within development teams, right? Actual developers that are being trained in the, kind of arts of security. They're there as local resources to the development teams to make sure they understand the issues and the controls that need to be put in place. So I do think we're making progress. It feels slow, because, it's hard. it's really hard to secure applications at scale. But overall, if we compare where we are today to where we were, 3-4 years ago, I do think we're moving in the right direction.
Are we allotting enough time and reasonable expectations for achieving that goal? And I ask the question because many organizations, somebody comes down and they give the good sermon on DevSecOps and everybody nods their head, and then they go back to their respective offices and cubicles and they discover they have no tools for implementing any of that. So then they roughly forget about the sermon about 20 minutes after it was given. And the issue becomes, well, we have all these developers. Can we train them on cybersecurity in a meaningful way? Because frankly, there's thousands of them and they will all have different levels of skill. So there's always going to be mistakes made, but we don't have enough cybersecurity professionals to stick in the DevOps processes to help them secure all this stuff. So how do we solve this issue?
I think a lot of it has to do with setting a set of very clear criteria for when deploys and builds will fail because of security issues. If you have organizations that are able to sweep it under the rug, right, keep doing their thing, shipping insecure code, you're not really going to change the behavior. Now, security folks do have to do their part, right, which is to normalize and groom a lot of the issues that do come out of kind of the testing that happens in the pipeline. They have to have realistic expectations about what really should fail a build and what kind of creates unacceptable risk to the organization. We have to be realistic about that. We have to communicate and be accessible to the developers to help them work through the issues, especially when their builds do fail. But if there are no consequences to doing and shipping insecure code, then shockingly enough, we're going to continue to ship insecure code. And again, we're talking a little bit about, kind of the chicken or the egg here, right? If we don't have enough people in order to, kind of enforce the processes and help the developers, yet we're going to start inflicting these consequences on developers. Does this create, a significant, kind of negative flywheel effect on that front? And possibly, right, which is why I keep talking about, kind of having to have the incentives correct, why we have to be realistic about what should fail a build, but the idea that, kind of developers can pretty much do what they want and then, never have anything, kind of kicked out and just to ship insecure code. I think if that's acceptable in your organization, you're never really going to make progress.
As part of that conversation, is security going to be a set of distinct motions within the application development process, or is it really just a subset of the quality assurance process and we just need to take our existing QA process and kind of extend it a little bit?
Yeah. I think it's both, Mike, and that's not really a cop-out answer there. I think that we have to address and integrate security deeper into the development process. We can't take a pass on that one because as things get architected, as things get built, if we're not really looking at it from the standpoint of, assessing security until it gets to the test phase, going back and fixing, especially something that turns out to be a significant issue that would potentially require re-architecture, that's an unacceptable cost and an unacceptable delay in terms of shipping things. So we can't punt on integrating security into the development side. I also think we have to have, better and more educated testers that can infer and determine what is a logic flaw, right? What is, just a fairly simple testing thing. Because the reality is automated tests in the development process are really going to catch a certain category and class of attack. There are a lot of other ones that really have to be addressed as part of a QA process that really looks at the functionality of the application and looks at, how it can be misused. Again, not necessarily in a technical way, but, based upon the business logic there. So I think we have to bolster it in both ends. But to me, prioritizing, kind of the development side in the short term, just because, that's been something that has been neglected for ever, pretty much.
Of course, the developers will say that's going to result in the rate at which applications are built and deployed slowing down. And many of them would argue that that's unacceptable, so therefore we're not going to do that. Can we build safer applications faster, or are we kind of having a Ralph Nader moment here where all these digital business processes are basically unsafe at any speed?
Well, I listen, I'm not going to sit here and say we can have our cake and eat it too, like tomorrow, and we'll all get around the campfire and sing Kumbaya, right? I mean, it's a process, and we need to be dedicated to that process. And the reality is the developers are going to push back. Because it may, put some of their delivery timeframes at risk and add some significant, potential delays in their process and in their environment, which is why if you don't have senior level support for these initiatives, it's going to be very difficult to ultimately achieve them successfully. So somebody has to weigh in, right? And somebody, sitting in some corner office somewhere is going to have to say, no, we are going to ship secure code. And what we have to do is figure out a way to do that faster and more reliably, and really force the issue of collaboration, and force the issue of integrating, better tooling, and force the issue of, kind of doing more effective threat modeling up front to address a number of these potential issues earlier on in the process, and really kind of push down that mandate culturally. Right. And again, these are all cultural shifts. And if the culture doesn't support making the shift, shockingly enough, it doesn't happen as effectively as you would like to see. So I think that, the answer is, I mean, listen, everything is unsafe at every speed, right? I mean, that's just the way it's always been. I don't think that's going to change. So Ralph Nader, is still alive and well. I'm not even sure. Is he still alive and well? I'm not sure on that, but his concepts certainly are from that perspective. But I do think that, kind of we have to have senior level support, a mandate that we're going to work together and make this happen. And then, kind of being able to navigate that cultural evolution in a collaborative fashion. And that gives us a chance. Right, that gives us a chance, and I think back to the first point we tried to make, which is a lot of these initiatives happen pretty quickly, and I think that you can achieve that type of speed and that type of velocity of shipping code, but it has to be a truly integrated, collaborative process, and that's where a lot of initiatives fall down right now.
So what is your best advice to digital CxOs who kind of sit above these security and development teams in terms of how can they maybe be helpful, coach, or put this all together? I mean, do I just throw everybody in a room and lock the door and see who comes out at the end of the day? Or is there an intelligent way of going about doing this?
Yeah, it's not Thunderdome, right? We can't play Thunderdome with our development leaders and our security folks. They have to lead, right? They're called digital CxO leaders for a reason, and they have to lead. Right. They have to set the expectation. They have to, ensure that the incentives are aligned to, make sure this collaboration happens. They have to mediate the battles. And again, I don't want to do that. I have other stuff I have to do. Right. You hear all sorts of excuses as to, why leaders choose not to lead. But ultimately, if you've got a dysfunctional environment and your developers just can't get on the same page with the security folks, that's a leadership problem, right? So I would basically say to the digital CxO leaders there is, if your folks are throwing, kind of fecal matter at each other in these meetings, you've got to lead. Right. You've got to lead, and you've got to make sure that, everybody understands why this is in the best interest of the organization. And that you're going to align the incentives to make sure that everybody plays ball.
Do you think we'll see digital CxOs getting fired because of application security issues that weren't addressed?
They'll get fired after the CISO goes. So the CISO goes first, right? The VP of development goes next. And then if it's still, kind of a total fail, then you'll have the digital CxO leaders go, because I mean, I don't need to tell the 3 envelope story, right? I mean, the digital CxO leaders have 3 envelopes like everybody else, right? First step is fire CxO, right? Second step is fire the VP of development, and then the third step is write 3 letters. So I mean, I think that the reality is that the senior person isn't going to be the first one to take the hit. But ultimately, I don't think you can be successful in these initiatives if you are accepting undue risk on the part of the organization. So you're going to have to fix it, right? And that gets back to again, leadership. And I think that that is certainly an underappreciated skill nowadays. But it makes a difference, and we've seen environments that do work well. They do ship secure code. They do it with high velocity and high quality, and they do it because they work together. Because kind of they've aligned the requirements, they've aligned the incentives, and everybody understands that we're all on the same team. We're trying to just make it better and make the experience better for customers. And the more you resist, it's kind of like a Zen thing, right? Everybody is going to have pain, but suffering is a choice, right? And I think that a lot of folks choose to suffer, and they don't need to.
All right, folks, you heard it here first. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of proverbial digital business transformation cure later on. Hey, Mike, thanks for being on the show.
You bet. It's great to chat, Mike. Looking forward to the next one.
All right, folks, you can find this podcast and all our other videos on the Digital CxO website. We invite you to check them all out. Until then, see you next time.